Cave In is where we're going to go next, and Heavy Pendulum. This seems like a pretty exciting release for heavy music fans, because the last time we heard from Cave In was in 2019 when they released Final Transmission, which was an album that they had been working on when their longtime bassist Caleb Schofield passed away, and they released this album as a quite beautiful, quite fragile tribute to him, essentially. It was very much a record that felt like it had an enforced stop put to it by Caleb's passing. It was a record where you could feel that it was a record that was on its way to being just finished, like any other Cave In record, but then had something happen to it that stopped it. And that kind of abrupt, cut short, demo-ish feel to it was quite palpable in conveying that,
feeling of loss.
Yeah, that abrupt loss and that absence of someone no longer being there. So it was a very worthy and emotive project. But for all those things, you couldn't really judge it as anything outside of that, because, that extremely vulnerable, naked thing that it was. It was the shortest Cave In record to date because of
31 minutes, weren't it?
Yeah. So this, Heavy Pendulum, it has been spoken about as Cave In's first full studio album in over a decade, when they released White Silence in 2011. So very consciously, this isn't last time. This is another type of project entirely. They've got a new lineup, obviously, featuring Nate Newton from Converge as full-time bass player. And this rebirthed Cave In is coming at us with, flip side of Final Transmission, a pretty enormous project. We were all raving about Stephen Brodsky's contributions to Converge's Blood Moon project last year, so I can assume that we've all got a great respect for him artistically. But does that respect extend into, fandom of Cave In?
I mean, Cave In are awesome. They're not, of those kind of early noughties bands, they're not kind of my favourite, but they're great. Awesome band.
Yeah, no, again, they're one of those bands that I'm like a super casual listener of, and every time I stick them on, I go, I should listen to this band more, shouldn't I? They're fucking ace. How they went from scathing hardcore punk to this weird prog alt rock thing to where we are today with this one.
Yeah,
really fascinating band.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, and I was just hit listening to this. How singular it is in that way. Cave In, they do originally come from that world of angular
hardcore,
metallic hardcore bands like Converge and Botch and stuff like that. But the way that they became such cult legends for turning that into progressive space rock on Jupiter, huge anthemic songs on Antenna, and you can
Antenna's my favourite.
Might be mine as well. But you hear those flavours in everything that these guys do, even outside of Cave In, with Mutoid Man, the Blood Moon record, and this record is such an intense consolidation of everything Cave In is and has been.
I think it's an expansion of that as well, really, because there is so much on this record.
Yeah, we say it's an expansion. It's yes, literally, it's 70 minutes long.
Yes, that's what I mean. That is what I mean. It is taking everything that Cave In have done and going, we're going to draw all of that out and make it as big and all-consuming as possible.
Have they ever sounded so indebted to the Nug? Some of this is so stoner rock you can almost smell it. Have I missed something with this band before?
No, I think part of that might be the production, which is obviously the fact they haven't made they haven't got that many albums. They aren't as active as Converge, for example. So when you are going to classic Cave In records, you're going to a different era of sound, and it is quite glorious to get such just a wonderfully full sounding Cave In record today. And it's got a picture of Saturn on the cover. They have come back to make a fucking album, and it's last time we did something that was embryonic, and this time we are firing all the way out, where there are bits on it that sound like the kind of space rock stuff that turns up in psychedelic ambient doom. They are of this kind of crop of bands. They are for sure more the astral travelers of that lot.
Yeah. I think that you were saying about the Sona stuff, Alec. That is definitely dialed up on this record, and again, part of just making it this journey of the kind of space traveling, ethereal, a lot of what those stoner records are. It is such it's still recognisably Cave-In, I think, this, but it's just kind of dialing up those big, ringing out, like, thick riffs. Like, it's such a big part of this sound.
I mean, that, and as well, like, it just sounds so, like, actually cool. Like, Queens of the Stone Age cool. Or, like, you know when people were saying that Turbo Wolf were, like, the coolest band in the UK for, like, a year or whatever.
God, Cave-In are so much cooler than Turbo Wolf.
Yeah, of course they are, yeah. But you know what I mean? It's that level of, like, just so, like, effortlessly cool all across the record. Like, whether it is that kind of, like, even when they're doing their, like, fucking Gold Cobra intro bra levels of portmanteauing on Pendulambulant, whatever it's called. Like, it's so, yeah, it's just so fucking cool all the way through.
I mean, it's pretty amazing that we've got something of this magnitude in just 3 years from them, given that there was 8 between White Silence and what ended up being Final Transmission. And then you factor in the fact that, you know, they did lose a member and a close friend and then had to pick up from there personally, and you get this. But I'm so glad.
And Stephen Brodsky's been doing other stuff in the time as well.
Yeah, exactly that as well. But, you know, I am so glad that they have come back with this, because if things on that last album had a kind of intentional demo-ish quality, the fucking guitar tone on this record, like, there's a special kind of rumble that seems to come out of, like, Kurt Ballou adjacent bands, but Nate Newton's bass tone on this and Stephen Brodsky's guitars, which you even hear that when you say about him doing other things, you hear that on those fucking 2 Minutes to Late Night covers that he's on. When Brodsky's on one, it's like, oh shit, that guitar sounds amazing. Like, it's unmistakable.
We said the Kurt Ballou adjacent bands. The Kurt Ballou production job on this is just a Kurt Ballou masterclass. Like,
fucking just beautiful, fucking absolutely wonderful. Like, New Realities riff is the biggest goddamn wrecking ball, and that was the single that I heard where I went, okay, yeah, we got to cover this Cave-In record.
Yeah, like, New Reality, right? The sonic devastation of that riff, and how glorious that chorus is when it comes in.
Huge.
Fucking amazing. Like I was saying, like a 70-minute record can test my love for a band, but when they pull it off, like, it's just magnificent.
Yeah, and again, we were talking about the Matt Heafy project, and that didn't feel like 60 minutes. It really doesn't feel like it's 70 minutes long at all. Like, even
I can just sit in this world and just have my head caved in by this band, pun intended.
No, but like, even with, like, Wavering Angel, it's like 12 minutes long. I think it's the longest Cave-In song ever. That does, like, I had no idea.
Stunning.
Yeah, it's beautiful, and like, I had no idea that was 12 minutes long. Like, this is shocking, like, deceptively long.
I mean, just on that sound again, like, fucking bass riffs like Amaranthine sound fucking amazing. The distortion in the tone at the start of Waiting for Love, like, with a fucking vocal part that sounds like Opiate era Tool. Like, where does that come from? It's so inventive across the runtime. The way Searchers of Hell comes in is ungodly. Like, heavy guitars were made so riffs could sound like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, mate, like, when they just want to destroy everything on this album, and just like, you have that, like, scratchy guitar line on the verse as well. Like, Searchers of Hell is just ridiculously brilliant.
And because it's, as you said, like, really, has that doom element, it has the sludge element, it has the fucking Kurt Ballou hardcore element, but they are, you know, really upbeat rock songs that veer back and forth into, like, really fucking gutsy, powerful sludge and stuff like that.
Got a sort of Queens of the Stone Age if they were, like, a hardcore band kind of vibe going on.
Yeah, if they played the same shows as ISIS.
Yeah,
not
like,
that one.
but yeah, like, totally. But because it's got that kind of desert rock thing going on, where it's like cooler than cool rock songs, but just with a guitar like tone that is just gonna destroy the earth.
Yeah, like floating skulls that severed from spines, losing their minds, slipping out of skin, dancing in the wind, so it goes. Like that. Well, like, when I said that Turbo Wolf thing, what I meant was when people were talking about Turbo Wolf, I wanted them to sound like that. Like, that's
just the Brodsky in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
and you mentioned Searchers of Hell with the Searchers of Hell bit, like, it's
cocaine. Cool. But yeah, they're fucking, because it's Brodsky, like, the guitar work is really inventive as well as just being heavy. Like, if you are a Mastodon fan and you like the kind of like crazy fretwork stuff that Brent and Bill do, like Floating Skulls on top of being a beautiful title, like incredibly engaging to the ear for that. And I mean, there's a big shimmery guitar line that comes in a few times on Blinded by a Blaze that remind me of like Svalbard and stuff like that. But it's, you know, it's really elevating guitar playing in terms of what is underneath it. That lead guitar in New Reality makes what could be a quite one-dimensional up-tempo riff song in something really grand. And when you have the vocal interplay that you've got going on top of that, like, fucking amazing when you have Nate Newton coming in as like the more guttural vocal counterpoint to Stephen Brodsky, and who is so fucking powerful. He's just a bit behind the likes of Scott Kelly and Steve Von Till. Like, he's earth-shattering on this.
That blood spiller watch it rise bit at the end of
man.
that track, like, oh god, you wish every band could be that heavy at
over
times.
the Doom riff in Careless Offering, just go in for it.
Careless Offering. Yeah.
And he's against, you know, Stephen's kind of snake-like alt-rock vocal mannerisms, which are really unique and add a really brilliant individual dimension to a band like Cave In, who, you know, when you look at the kind of bands who Cave In are surrounded by, they could slip into that kind of very po-faced, extreme bleakness, artistic seriousness or whatever, in these kind of the way that these kind of artistically minded, you know, hardcore or sludge bands or whatever often are. But it's so much fun, and it's having so much fun just like rocking along. That chorus in Floating Skulls is fucking wicked, like not dissimilar from the kind of thing you get from Puppy later on, but Heavy Pendulum has this kind of like kickback grunginess that reminded me of like Screaming Trees.
Yeah, that Heavy Pendulum, The Weight Is All We Know, like that is that kind of like just fucking dirty but like instantly like catchy grunge stuff. But yeah, I mean it's so heavy, man. Like that kind of like doom riff, it is like a heavy pendulum. Like it is so satisfying to hear. I think what you were talking about with Mastodon as well, that is such a good shout, because I know, I guess Cave In are kind of, when people talk about Cave In, it's like the whole like, oh, they were a hardcore band and now they do this other thing and now they do this other thing. But it's like, I think if you've not heard Cave In before and you like Mastodon and you like the kind of like the weird places they go over like several records, I think you could get on board with this.
Yeah, I think like this kind of sounds like a hardcore band throwing their hands at what Mastodon do in a lot of ways, like, because you can still feel you can still feel the root of a hardcore band in this, I think, like, and you're just gonna and that just the bass sound of it, the rawness, that intensity, that is a hardcore band. It's just them kind of going, well, we're gonna play so much more than just hardcore.
Yeah, and like I did feel that I'd been a lot of places already with I you know, when I was listening to this, I was aware of the fact that I had 13 tracks which had like done a lot, and then there was a 12-minute song coming up at the end, and I was like, is that going to be the point where it gets pushed over the edge? But I think if you are in the kind of mindset where you're willing to put something like Hushed and Grim by Mastodon on, which is 15-20 minutes longer than this, like, kick back and put it on for a while. It's a pretty great thing to lose yourself in for an evening. And as the record goes on, like, you know, that opening run is such a riff fest, but the way it's paced to then gradually get into stuff like Blinded by a Blaze, which is so carefully put together as this kind of like space rock ballad, and then, you know, Nightmare Eyes again, all the way through to Wavering Angel, which feels like it has a real amount of circumstance to it as a closer, like the really long extended intro, but then it boots off and the guitars are just screaming, and there's that massive dual harmony outro. Like it's consistently killer stuff.
Yeah, like I think those longer songs are like placed really carefully in the album, where they're surrounded by more immediate kind of burst to pull you back in after you've kind of like transcended with these longer, more progressive songs, and just having Wavering Angel, that outro with those guitar leads, like that goes on for about 4 minutes, but it's just really like hypnotic and just kind of like emotionally impactful.
Yeah, Wavering Angel is such a payoff. Like Nate was saying, it was supposed to be a Mutoid Man song, originally, but it was like, nah, it needs like 2 guitars on it.
I mean, Mutoid Man's a lot more just like fun. Like, if you like the fun side of this, that's the band you got to check out. This is way more explorative. Like its sheer size will probably be daunting for a lot of people. But the fact is, like, when we talk about Cave In, we do tend to talk about one of Until Your Heart Stops, Jupiter, or Antenna, dependent on what kind of Cave In sound that we're going for there. And 18 years after the last one of those, we've got a record that sounds like just definitively Cave In. Like, you can get exactly the vibe of what band they are from this, and they are a present, you know, fucking great band again, back from the brink of where they were a few years ago. I think it's so admirable.
Yeah, no, I think this is as comeback records go, you could argue, it sounds so full and complete, and just like I said, it still sounds recognizable as Cave In. It doesn't feel like there has been a change. It has affected the sound, but it's not. It doesn't feel like it's not that band that you loved if you got into those early records.
Yeah, and you know, the Converge connection is obvious because they've worked together so closely over the years. Now they have a member of Converge in the band, while Brodsky is back out on the road playing Converge shows with them. But like, I know there are as well a lot of people out there who have found bands like Converge quite difficult to get into and to jive with for whatever reason. The kind of difficult extremity or the really stark, intense emotional veil that is just like on all the time. Try this. Like, it's got many of the pros that people tend to rave about with these kind of, you know, metallic hardcore turned general heavy music Voyager type bands, but it's got a lot of just fun kick-ass rock factor to it. It's not as hard going, and it might help ease you into the zone of, you know, Massachusetts, Hydra Head, Deathwish, Relapse, whatever type music. I think aside from Ibaraki, this is my favourite album covering this month.
Oh, I don't know. This, like, I've had just a very good time. Like, possibly Malevolence Me, just because of just that album is just like serotonin just pouring all over me.
This one's a bit more me, but yeah, I think it's just really fucking.
It's up there. Like,
record.
Like I say, this is a good chance I will be talking about this album later this year.
That would be super cool. Heavy Pendulum by Cave In is the name of that.